Hi, this is Father Michael Stalla. I am the spiritual director for Hope's Garden. Today, we're talking to the men in particular. Wanted to address a video to you as well. You know, a lot of times men have a misconception of what it means to be a man. And certainly our culture today has been kind of pushing down on men to stop being so manly. Of course, the idea is that we use Christ as our model for what it means to be a man. So Christopher West had this great analogy. He said he had a vision and he was on the beach and a guy came walking by and he's got big muscles and a girl on each arm. And he kind of looks over at him as he passes him on the beach and goes, "What's up?" And then another guy comes walking up and he's dragging a cross and he's got a crown of thorns and he's beaten and bruised. And he stops right in front of him and turns and looks at him and says, "Who's the real man?" You know, there's a part of us that really wants to be admired for being the right kind of man. And one of the traits that we think about ourselves is that we want to be strong. Being a strong man really has less to do with our ability to overpower someone else and more to do with a sense of self-constraint. We have a self-mastery that other people cannot manipulate us. You could have a really strong person, but you can manipulate them into losing their cool or getting embarrassed in front of other people. Or you could have somebody like Jesus, and the crowds were against him, and they would flog him. They would put nails in his hands, but he would not change from his original position. If it's his decision to love, to sacrifice, to be merciful, there's nothing you can do that's going to change that. He is so free that the world no longer has control over him. And that is ultimately the idea behind the cross. The cross was an attempt to control Jesus, to give him the fear so he changes, revises what he's trying to say to the people, or at least to his disciples to say, "Don't you dare do what he's doing or you're going to end up just like him." But the freedom that they have is a self-mastery. Nobody can manipulate them. Nobody can change them. And as a result, they then are very secure in who they are. Now, in our society, there's a lot of men that, because of insecurities, oftentimes tend to dominate over people who they consider to be somehow weaker. They make fun of them. They abuse them verbally. Sometimes they even get physically involved. And this can be also in the relationship between man and woman. And turning toward those mechanisms is really a sign that somebody is truly weak and is no longer in control of their faculties. But somebody who has a true strength in Jesus Christ does what is right, good, holy, noble, and does so even when it's difficult, maybe especially when it's difficult. Because to be honest, Jesus would say, what credit is there for you to do exactly as the pagans do? You have to be something other than the pagans. And this is really what shocked people about Christianity in the first century, is that they could not get them to bend to the will of the crowd. And they were so free that no matter what hostilities were against them, they maintained their composure and they would not respond evil for evil or violence for violence. And in so doing, they were repeating what Jesus had done, becoming that ultimate example. Now, in our culture, sometimes we've lost a sense of chivalry or a sense of, just being good men with respect for women. And why have we lost that? Well, on the first hand, it might be a little bit because of just culture in general, kind of beating up on men about your being toxic in some way. And so then there becomes this pendulum swing. Either we keep quiet when it's time to speak up, or we talk too loudly because we're frustrated and angry about all these things. And so there isn't really a self-mastery there. There is a kind of a person who doesn't have control of their own emotions, the passions. The word passion means that something is happening to us and we're just reacting to it. We're like a leaf in the wind. We just respond to the situation in an inappropriate way. But then, if you think about somebody who is really in control of their own emotions, what do? Despite the fact that others might think of them as lesser, they do the simple gestures, the not speaking over someone else when they're speaking, the complimenting somebody on something that they've done well, the ability to take even a criticism or an insult without immediately lashing back, but really let it sink in. As St. Paul would say, test everything and keep what is good. In essence, what you say doesn't hurt me. It might actually help me. It might help me to see more clearly how I can do it better. And if it's useless information, I just let it roll off. It's not going to affect my personal dignity. And I don't give people permission to do that. Now, there are little gestures that men and women do to each other to show appreciation for each other. One is, opening a door or a gesture of offering a drink or pulling a chair out for somebody. These are kind of outward signs of saying, I respect you. However, there are other ways in which we gently show disrespect for each other. And that might be given a kind of a snarky remark to somebody. That might be rolling your eyes at somebody. That might be, making fun of something that they take seriously. These little gestures that we're doing is kind of an outward sign to others and to that person, I don't respect you. Well, why don't they respect him? Usually it has something to do with an insecurity in themselves, and they need to find themselves trying to be better than the other person in some way. So they feel like they have to push the other person down. They had a saying in El Salvador about crabs in a bucket. You don't need to put a lid on a bucket full of crabs. Why not? Because as one crab starts crawling up, the other one will want to crawl up and will pull down the first one in order to try to get up. By the time the other one starts getting a little closer to the edge, another one will pull him down trying to get itself up, and they keep each other down the entire time. So in essence, if we're constantly trying to show other people how great we are, or that we're better than them, or that they're lesser than us, we end up just, being crabs in a bucket. We never actually get to our goals of showing forth the true dignity and the strength that it takes to be a man. Some of the things that we notice in the traditional sense of the word chivalry, when the ship is going down, who gets into the lifeboats first? The women and the children. You might say, why? Why the women and the children? Because the men have a duty to protect the women and the children. Perhaps this is one of the reasons why just genetically we tend to be, when you look at large numbers, men tend to be stronger in the physical sense. Therefore, they have a responsibility to care for those who are weaker. This is kind of understood as being our culture. If somebody is strong, their duty is to take care of the weak. And when you hear about somebody getting picked on and the bigger person comes in and defends them, we think of that as honorable and noble. But if we think of somebody who's stronger picking on someone who is weaker, we think that's the absolute opposite. This is a despicable person. Perhaps the children might understand a little bit the superhero understanding. All of the good guys are strong, helping the weaker people. And the weaker people, they help because they believe in their dignity. You might not be physically stronger than me, but you are worth paying attention to. You're worth loving. On the opposite side, anybody who has a strength over the weaker people in the story and use it against them, well, those are the villains. Those are the ones who think because they are strong, they now have more value than the others. Not seeing the complementarity. There's a reason you were given strength. The strength was given to you for the purpose of holding up the dignity of others. So we see this repeated over and over again in cultures throughout the world and in history, where people who find themselves having certain strengths and certain weaknesses out of insecurity use their strengths to pull down and belittle the others. And that's like the epitome of a villain. Everybody in the story of your own life, you want to be the hero. I mean, at the end of your life, you don't want to look back and say, I was the jerk. I was the bad guy. We want to look back and say, I was the hero. I did what was demanded of me, what was my duty. And so what is our duty as men? In a particular way, it's never to use our strength or our intimidation or our ability to have some sort of status in a way that holds back anyone around us. In particular, those who are gentle. Traditionally, men with the strength protect the gentle dignity of the woman. Now, I know there are some women that are a lot stronger than me, physically stronger than me. Nonetheless, I should show her dignity, respect, simply because that's what a man should do toward a woman. That's important for us to do. This expresses my dignity as a man when I am kind, gentle, caring, compassionate toward a woman. It's not that one is better or less, that we're somehow the stronger sex and they're the weaker sex. It's simply how we use the strengths we have in recognition of the strengths of the other, which differ. Now, what I noticed happened sometimes in El Salvador was they certainly, in general, the men were physically stronger than women, but the women often had more education than the men, partially because of the same reason. When the boys were growing up, as soon as they were able to work on the farm, their parents asked them to leave school and go and work. Where the women had a little bit more time, they got to get more educated. They were able to read and write and even knew things about history and mathematics. And because of this, sometimes I saw that the men felt inferior to the women. And the ones that I noticed this about would tend to use their physical strength or their intimidation to try to belittle, they say it, enchicar, to belittle the other person. And I would immediately notice that not as a masculine trait, but as an insecurity. This person does not have mastery over their own emotions. In mastering their own emotions, they realize their own dignity and the dignity of the other. You have your strengths, and I should rejoice in that and protect that. I have my strengths, and you should rejoice over that and protect that. We protect each other's dignity. So with this in mind, as a man approaches any woman or really any other person, to have a sense of self-mastery, you will not manipulate me into following my emotions, and I have a self-security. I'm not so worried about looking stupid in front of other people. I know who I am. If somebody is still maturing, well, then keep maturing. Work on maturing. Learn what that means. How do I grow in my maturity and security of self? If people are insecure, they're probably immature, and they still haven't developed that, whether that's because they're following the wrong role models or they were never given this kind of talk. Work on it. It's not something that just happens automatically. You turn 21 and suddenly you got it. You have to consciously think about it. What does it mean to be a man, especially in relation to women or those who might be intimidated or threatened by any physical strength? In general, I would say men can be more aggressive than women. Not always the case. Sometimes the roles are reversed, but in general, that can be the case. As a result, if you really want to have an honest dialogue with somebody, even if it's an argument, you got to tone it back so that you hear what the other person is saying. One of the greatest ways to deal with any kind of serious discussion, argument about things, and to do so respectfully, is to first repeat back to the other person what you hear them saying. Because you might be already thinking about your argument, and you're going to come across aggressive, and you're trying to shut them up, and you're just trying to dominate the conversation, which you don't really win anything if you do that. People might get quiet, but they're not convinced. What we have to do is did I hear you correctly? Is this what you meant to say? And give them a chance to reword what they wanted to say until they got the right wording, and you can repeat it back to them. I understand what you're saying, and this is what the information I want to add to that, or the discussion I want to have to kind of fill that out. In doing so, it becomes less a power struggle and more of a seeking of truth together. And that's how we watch that we're not dominating or using our aggressiveness or our strength to belittle another person, but are truly being manly, being the kind of person who seeks dignity of both man and woman. So I ask Almighty God to help us as men to appreciate what we've been given and appreciate what others have, in particular when it comes to women, and to show them dignity and respect, and be very careful not to use any of the gifts we've been given to belittle in any way or to dominate in any way those who have every right and all the dignity of the children of God. Amen.